So today we are talking about being present, the power of now, and also how we fall down and need to get back up. So that's the title of this talk, Falling Down and Getting Up. And I think everyone at some point in time has fallen down. Some of you probably maybe have grandkids or remember when your children or your nephews or your nieces, they would be, trying to get up and walk, and then they would stumble and they'd fall over, and you'd rush over and you'd help them up, right? And so that is a part of life, helping get back up again. So today I'd like to ask you 3 questions. Number 1, why do we fall down? Number 2, is falling down failure? And number 3, how do we get back up? So I want to tell you a story first, and this is a story from The Exquisite Risk by Mark Nepo. And so Mark has a friend named Robert, and Robert needs to paint his house. And so he goes and he buys everything. He goes to the store, he buys that drop cloth, and he buys his red paint, and he buys those those brushes that, they tell you can get clean and they never get clean, those brushes. So some of you know that drill. And so he carries it back home, and he's got the paintbrush in one hand, and he's got he had the paintbrush actually in his mouth. He has a drop cloth under one arm and the paint can, and he's trying to get through the door. And he knows deep down that if he would lay something down, this would be a whole lot easier. Have any of you been there? But no, of course, that stubbornness we're going to get through. And he sort of tumbles, and all of a sudden he falls back, and he gets red paint all over him. And what does he do? He just starts laughing. And so I am pretty sure I would not be laughing at that moment, but he does. And what this story is a great metaphor of how we sometimes fall down because of what we're carrying. And so he had the drop cloth, and sometimes we are carrying, especially in this pandemic, we're carrying maybe our memories, okay? He had the paint can. Are we carrying the way things should be? And then he had the brushes or the other stuff. Are we carrying living in the past or living in the future or not living in the present moment? And so I know just from a personal standpoint that I catch myself sometimes sort of like not living, like waiting for the pandemic just to be over, like, oh, things are going to change and I'll do this when the vaccine comes out or when the pandemic goes away, or you can fill in the blank of when. And so we're not living in the present moment. And we really have to. We have to learn to live in a different way. Now, we've opened up here, so this is an odd time for me to be talking about this. But we have to take and embrace the changes that we have. We have electronic and virtual services now. What if we take and embrace that? What if we take and embrace virtual hugs, okay? We are really, when you think about it, we are so lucky to have this electronic world. And of course, a physical hug is so much better. But what if we took and those virtual hugs I'm giving to Christine right now, or Chris, they can feel it. Can't you feel it? So we allow ourselves to change during this time. And we let go. We put down what doesn't serve us. The second thing I had to ask you is falling down failing? What do you think? What do you think? Is falling down failing? No, no. It can be, though. How can it be falling down can be failing? If we think it is, right? If you go and you think that falling down is failing, it can be. This is what Joseph Campbell says about falling down. Joseph Campbell says, when you stumble and fall, there you discover gold. There you discover gold. And getting up isn't about winning. It's not about changing the situation. But what getting up is just getting out of that valley of regret, that valley of disappointment, that valley of depression. That's what getting up is. I want to tell you, I've fallen down quite a few times in the way I've handled world situations, okay? I've fallen down when I might be a little too passionate about my opinions. You know, I've fallen down. And I've fallen down when sometimes I don't live up to my values because I might be a little insecure. I might want other people to like me. Those things, I'm wanting those things that my ego tells me I need. And you know what, though? That's why you're listening to this talk, because you can watch me just brush myself off and get right up. And I invite all of you to just brush yourself off of anything that you feel like you've fallen down and just get back up, because that's what life is all about. So falling down is definitely not failing. When medieval monks were asked how they practiced their faith, they would say, by falling down and getting back up. Because all of us will fall down. It's called our humanness. And getting back up allows us a time to express who we truly are. It's a time to express that divine. It's a time that we can express and be transformed, getting back up. So the last question I have to you is, how do we get back up? How do we get back up? There are many ways that we get back up, and one of them is to realize that life is just change. Life is just change. And to take falling down as an experience of life, an experience, and to move on with that experience and to get back up. Other ways to get back up are to use our spiritual practices, affirmative prayer, meditation, all of the things that we learn, our truth, unity, truth principles. And then here's another way that helps us get back up, and that's through groups, through the group power. I think that's why we have churches and synagogues and spiritual centers, for people to gather. And people are gathering on Facebook and on YouTube, but it's an opportunity to gather. And when I say that the group helps us get up, I'm not talking about how maybe your minister helps you work through a problem, or you have a close friend at church that helps you, get through getting back up. And all those things are wonderful. But here I'm talking about the group power, what we might call a group soul. So yesterday we had a new member welcoming service orientation, and we had that. We had people on Facebook. We had people here present, just as we do now. but you could feel that group power. It was so amazing because Keith brought it up, and I was like, how did he hear my service? How did he hear my talk? But he brought it up, that this was just so powerful, being together. And it is as powerful being on Facebook and being with the group. We have so many classes available, so why don't people just take them alone? Because there is that group power, that group. You can often see that group power. Oh, can you flip it to the next slide? Sorry, must not be able to work this. You can see that group power in the animals. How many of you seen, like, you know, when you see a flock of birds, just, isn't that amazing? And isn't it amazing with fish, each individual fish, but then they go together, and they become this one power. They call it the power of the swarm. So, Jesus said in Matthew 18:20, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them." Jesus wasn't talking about physically being present, but he was talking about our higher self, the I am of us, our divine self being present, where 2 or 3 are gathered. Where 2 or 3 like-minded people are together, all things are possible. And it brings out our higher self. And so it's just a wonderful thing, this group power. So how do we get up? We get up through using our spiritual powers, our spiritual muscles. We get up through the group. We get up through different ways. And I want to tell you another story, okay? And this is about a divinity student. He was a young divinity student who was stricken by polio. He heard the most unique calling. And this calling was, number 1, to quit divinity school. Number 2, he has just been stricken by polio, so he's starting to lose his muscles in his legs, starting to use the capacity of using them. His calling was to begin to dance. Isn't that amazing, to begin to dance? This man his name was Ted Shawn. Here's another interesting fact about him. He was born in Kansas City, Missouri in 1891. And I just thought this was interesting, that Charles and Myrtle Fillmore moved to Kansas City, Missouri in 1894. And so this man, Ted Shawn, who was a divinity student, quits divinity school because he hears a calling to begin dance. And he becomes the founder of what we know today as modern dance. So as I was writing this talk, I was like, oh, should I use this story? I don't know. And then I had the Houston Chronicle out, and I pulled out the Zest portion of it. And a few hours later, I opened the Zest portion, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I looked at it, and on the front page, the Houston Ballet had chosen for their first show what they call a showing from Pillow Talk. Pillow Talk happens to be the school that is still running that Ted Shawn created in the 1930s. And so I was like, oh, doesn't that sort of give you goosebumps? So I was like, oh, that's God telling me, I always think coincidences are God's wink at you. So God was telling me, yep, that's a good story to use. And why I chose this story was because dance. Dance is such a unique thing. It can be so individual, but then it has a power to be with us. And so this, to me, was a story of where we have our individuality to get up, our spiritual powers unique to each of us, but then we have the group. We have the group power. And so there's just different ways when you fall down to get up. Think about it as an experience, and just move on. Now, you may want to get rid of that experience pretty quickly, so get up as soon as you can. And then you have your spiritual muscles. You have your affirmative prayer. And then you have the group power. So I invite all of you to get involved. Get involved here at Unity. Get involved in one of our many classes that we have on Zoom. Get involved as these new members have, joining, volunteering. It's a wonderful opportunity to have this group power. And I want to say this, because, you know, comedians know everything. Amy Poehler says, find a group who will challenge you. You will probably get challenged here. And find a group that will inspire you. Spend a lot of time with them, and it will change your life. So get involved here. Get involved with any spiritual center that you're involved with. But it will be a time that you can transform your life through expressing the divine that is in each one of us and expressing the divine that is within the group. That all things can be possible through this group power. All things can be possible through the expression of the divine that you are. And so we say, thank you, God, for allowing this truth of who we are. We are the expression of a God that lives around us, in us, and as us. And lastly, go out and go dance. Thank you.